Amidst all the excitement for the Half-Life 2 anniversary update and documentary, we also have 3 interesting leaks around different plans that Valve has for control pads, including one true successor to the Steam controller. We also have a new update on the Steam Deck, Stellar Blade is coming to PC, and some good news even from Epic Games. Let's get started with that first story. Alright, so 2 of these controller leaks are courtesy of Brad Lynch, aka Sadly It's Bradley, who is a notable VR personality and data miner. Valve is still one of the pioneering companies when it comes to virtual reality, so Brad spends a decent amount of time data mining Steam, particularly Steam VR. As a result of his prolific data mining and his findings, insiders also reveal some information to him. In this case, Brad tweets that months ago he was told of a Valve controller codenamed Roy and a spiritual successor to the Steam controller. Through data mining, you can now see Roy referenced in the back end of Steam VR, so we're going to get into that one soon, but first let's talk about the spiritual successor to the Steam controller. I'm going to call it Steam Controller 2 for this video. According to Brad's source, the Steam Controller 2 was in the EV1 stage at the time. EV1, or Engineering Validation 1, is the phase that happens after a concept is validated and likely before any manufacturing is set up. In this phase, they're likely prototyping various designs and determining what is viable and what areas still need tuning. But in his most recent tweet, Brad gave even more clarity. He said that the code name for Steam Controller 2 is Ibex, and his sources are saying that it's already being tooled for a mass production goal in their factories right now. Brad clarified that tooling for mass production doesn't actually mean it is in mass production. It can still take up to a year for tooling to finish and get this in front of consumers, but as he said, you don't collaborate on this type of effort unless you are planning to definitely launch it. As far as features go, Brad's sources tell him that the Steam Controller 2 will have symmetrical sticks, and that realistically it's not going to be far off from what the Steam Deck has, so it's exactly what you would expect and exactly what you would want. He says that the biggest change compared to the Steam Deck's inputs will be the shape and size of the trackpads that are going to look to fit something that is more of a traditional gamepad format. Sorry, if you were waiting for the boxy Steam controller, it looks like you're not going to be getting that. One thing I'm still unclear on is whether or not this would have dual stage triggers. If you don't know, I would say that's the main thing that the Steam Controller 1 has that is still missing on the Steam Deck. Those triggers basically functioned like GameCube triggers, where you would have a nice analog range, but it would click in for that last push. I'd love to see this come back for Steam Controller 2. Folks, I know how important it is for you to have the right power bank for the right occasion, and the new Ugreen Uno wireless power bank 15 watt is perfect for when you're on the go. It's got Qi 2 certified wireless magnetic fast charging that makes it convenient for your smartphone. The 10,000 milliamp hour capacity can fully charge an iPhone 16 Pro 1.6 times, and like I mentioned, look how convenient this is. You can use the built-in foldable stand to charge your phone while you're using it. Whether you're watching some YouTube, doing some scrolling, or just using the horizontal standby mode on your phones, this is a fun way to charge your phone. Speaking of fun, it has the unique Ugreen robot design. If your power bank has low battery, you get the tired looking robot, but if it's fully charged, you get the hard eyes. Of course, it can also just show the battery percentage so you know exactly how much juice you have left. Finally, this charger is compact and portable, about 3/4 the size of a phone, and easily fits in your pocket. If you're interested, be sure to check out all the Ugreen Black Friday deals using my links in the description. Thank you to Ugreen for sponsoring this video. So as you saw in those tweets, Ibex or Steam Controller 2 is not the only controller that Valve is preparing for a mass production goal in their factories. The other one has a code name of Roy. It's completely separate from Steam Controller 2, and it looks to be the main controller for use with the Deckard. If you recall, the Deckard is basically a Steam Deck for your face. It's a VR headset that Valve has been prototyping. Currently, they're prototyping it using SteamOS 3.0 as the operating system, and it is likely to be at least partially powered by an ARM CPU. That's also why Valve has been working on various translation layers from and to ARM. So this was another controller that Brad was told about by his sources, but it's now showing up in the back end of Steam VR. And in another tweet, Brad details that Roy will have at least a D-pad, bumpers, grip buttons, triggers, ABXY, a system button, and some sort of strap. He says there might even be more inputs, but this is what we know so far. He adds that most of the physical buttons will actually have capacitive touch, and this is going to help create the skeleton for a hand pose. Now, if you're wondering what Valve could provide with the Deckard that would be interesting above and beyond what you can already get with the Quest, Brad says that Valve still sees VR as a nascent industry that deserves experimentation, even if it fails. Interestingly, he also notes that a lot of what's been data mined so far points to a larger focus on playing the entire Steam gaming library on a big virtual screen than previous Valve head-mounted displays. That last point is really what's leading to the notion that Deckard is really going to be a Steam Deck for your face. Now, the last controller leak is certainly the least, but I do think there's at least something interesting about this. So this is a new video that appears to be of a Steam licensed controller, just like the wireless HoriPad for Steam. This controller looks closest to GameSir, and so it appears that GameSir is the next third party to make a Steam licensed controller. As I've said before, I do think Steam licensed controllers are going to become an interesting space because they have native Steam input support, which means they have a lot more freedom to incorporate different inputs. These controllers are already better for PC gaming than third-party Xbox controllers because they have gyro, and at least these two models have capacitive touch sticks. Hopefully we see more of these, and maybe eventually we get some with trackpads. So you guys know the Steam Deck Limited Edition White launched this week. Now, this new Steam Deck colorway is sexy as hell if you prefer white electronics, though by now many people have voiced their concerns about white electronics. Still though, the thing about this Steam Deck is that it was only going to be available in limited quantities. Each region was going to have its own amount of units available for purchase, and when it's gone, it is gone. Well, it turns out that the new Steam Deck is already sold out in 2 regions. They were sold out first in Australia, which, you know, is the newest region to get Steam Decks, but the white Steam Deck is also already sold out in the UK as well. There's still availability, albeit limited, in the US, Canada, EU, and all of the Komodo regions. On the retail side, it turns out that Micro Center is now selling Steam Deck OLEDs in store. This was posted over on the Steam Deck subreddit, and it shows that this person's local Micro Center had at least a couple Steam Decks in stock. If you're looking to see if your local Micro Center has these in stock, you can check the online listing, which I'll leave a link to in the description. My closest stores didn't have any stock available, but this is interesting nonetheless. Micro Center is pretty much my favorite tech store, so I am really happy to see this development. So what game news should you be aware of for your Steam Deck or PC in general? Well, quite a few actually, starting with one that you should skip entirely if you're only playing on the Steam Deck, and that is Stalker 2. Stalker 2 has been highly anticipated for some time, seeing as the original Stalker game is not only a cult classic, it's one of those games that's beloved by people that were praising Steam and the PC scene back in the early 2010s, myself included. So far, reviews for Stalker 2 have been quite good. That said, this game is unsupported on Steam Deck. Meanwhile, Steam Deck HQ recently published a video showcasing performance on the deck, and yeah, it looks pretty rough, so don't expect this one to be playable on the deck. Next up, the developers behind Stellar Blade Shift Up have once again been talking about Stellar Blade coming to PC. This is reported on by Gaming on Linux, and it comes from the latest Shift Up earnings report, where they say the release is being considered within 2025, considering recent trends such as Steam's expanding market share in the AAA game sector and the global success of Black Myth Wukong. We expect performance on PC to exceed that on consoles. I can't lie, I'm expecting the same thing. I have a PS5, but I haven't picked this up because personally, I've been waiting for the PC port. How about you? By now, you've heard about the big anniversary update to Half-Life 2. I know you have because it actually had a new all-time peak concurrent players, this time breaking 64,000 concurrent players for the first time since SteamDB has been a thing. Notably, Half-Life 2 predates SteamDB by a number of years, so it could be that there was a higher number of concurrent players closer to launch. Still though, this resurgence makes sense. Valve basically did a complete re-release of their best-known game, released it as a free update, even made the game completely free to keep for a few days. This is a tremendous move in an age where publishers are selling mediocre re-releases and delisting the original games. The anniversary update merged Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Episode 2 into one launchable app. There are some graphics updates like removing LOD models when you set model detail too high. Lighting has been improved. Every map got some updates like rooftop geometry that was added for distant buildings that may not have previously had that geometry. So yeah, this is an incredible update. Outside of the game itself, there's a new Half-Life 2 website, they're re-releasing the Raising the Bar book, there's new artwork and wallpapers, and the complete soundtracks for these games have been released to music streaming services like Spotify. Then, of course, there was the excellent Half-Life 2 documentary where we got a look at Gaben from what is likely to be one of his super yachts. And I don't know, I feel like we got as close as possible to a Valve tease of Half-Life 3. Gabe spoke about the Half-Life franchise and how it represents promises that they've made to customers to build game experiences that just haven't been done previously. And then he goes on to say, I think there are no shortage of those opportunities facing us as an industry right now. Almost as if to say there is no better time than right now for us to show the industry how it's done and release a jaw-dropping Half-Life entry. We already know from leaks that it's in development, but Valve's willingness not only to speak about the ill-fated Episode 3, but also to talk about the future of Half-Life so openly, certainly that makes me feel like they're particularly serious about the next Half-Life entry, and maybe we'll hear about it soon. I mentioned mediocre re-releases from publishers that delisted the original game, and certainly the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition belongs on that list. Thankfully, 3 years later, this game has been updated to actually be quite good now. I was checking the video on this from Modern Vintage Gamer, and there's now a classic lighting mode which restores the color and lighting of the original PS2 entries, and fog has been reintroduced as well. These two changes alone do a great job of restoring the atmosphere of the original titles, but they also fixed the character rigging and updated the control scheme to match that of GTA 5, so you actually have decent controls for once. Now, according to Gaming on Linux, you may encounter an error playing this title on Steam Deck, but it appears that it's easily fixable in the properties. I'll leave a link with instructions on how to fix this in the description. Speaking of games preservation, I should point out that you can now freely download Unreal Tournament and Unreal 1 on archive.org. Previously, these games were delisted from every store, including Epic's own, but most recently, Epic has actually given special permission to a community-based team that has been updating these older Unreal Engine 1 games. This team is called Old Unreal, and they have full game installers for these two titles. The permission that Epic gave them allows these installers to download the original disk image from archive.org. From there, the installer will extract the contents and install the latest Old Unreal patch. Neat stuff. Speaking of preservation, I have a pretty disappointing update for Steam users in Germany. Less than a week ago, a content rating requirement started being enforced for Steam in Germany, and we're now starting to see the fallout from that, with hundreds of Steam apps being hidden from German players. A little context, there was a German law passed some years ago that forced game developers to include content rating for their games, but earlier this year, the German regulatory authority, BZKG, ruled that this law applies not only to newly released games, but also to the back catalog of older games. This subsequently and rather suddenly put the onus on game developers of older games, perhaps even games whose store pages the developers haven't touched in years, to now fill out a questionnaire on Steamworks or have their game hidden. Well, at this point, there are at least 2,000 such games, DLC, and demos that show as hidden for users on SteamDB. Now, we won't know the true fallout for some time because some of these games are just delisted everywhere, not just in Germany, and so we're going to have to sift through that. But just from doing a cursory search, I found games like the original Binding of Isaac that is hidden from German users but still have an active store page, at least for me. There are also games like Dungeons of Dreadmore and Capsize. Certainly these are games that have low interest today in 2024, but this is disappointing for a platform whose catalog goes back decades. On the other hand, there are some games that may be coming back to Steam soon. Hazador Gaming on Twitter pointed out that Activision has been updating their delisted titles on Steam, which you can actually track on SteamDB. These delisted titles are all licensed properties like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 and Transformers Fall of Cybertron, but the one I'm most interested in is actually Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutants in Manhattan, which is the TMNT game that was developed by Platinum Games. Yeah, you know, the guys behind Bayonetta, Vanquish, Nier Automata, and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. In any case, and as far as I can tell, all of the updates have to do with an added screenshot for the store page. For example, this one for TMNT, or this one for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. Hopefully this means that these games are in fact set to come back to Steam sometime soon. On the subject of games, I do want to recommend a game called Tricky Madness. It's still in early access, but if you're a fan of SSX Tricky, this is worth at least keeping an eye on. It's currently $8 and it's inspired by classic snowboarding games like SSX and 1080. Currently, there's only 2 levels and 2 characters out of a planned 8 for each of those. Overall, I'm having fun with it so far, but definitely do be aware that it's light on content. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. That gang out. Goodbye.